All right, folks. So this is a quick walkthrough on creating the style guide for Project One. So I have got here I'm actually in week 4 of our D2L class, and I'm specifically in the Project One Part 3 style guide spec sheet, which we talked about very briefly in class, but I'd love to kind of walk you through the code for this. So essentially what we're going to be doing in this project is just creating a really basic HTML document that's based off of our starter page as a start. What we're going to be doing is putting in all of this HTML and then styling it potentially with, not potentially, but actually with the style guide, or I should say a style sheet. So some things here that you want to be aware of. This should go inside of your project root folder, same one that we used for the proposal a few weeks ago. So we'll be saving this inside of there. We're going to be making, as it says here, an HTML file. It should be called styleguide.html. And in that folder also, we should have a style guide style sheet file, CSS file, that we're going to call style.css. And we're going to be sure that we link that as well. Okay. So there's some examples of some of the things that you can style in here, but I'll kind of walk you guys through that here as we're going. Also, as it says in the assignment sheet, you can enhance your font choice with, using like Google Fonts, for example. And then this will all be due before class next week. And you'll just submit this the same way that you submitted the proposal. You'll just zip up the entire root folder and you'll submit it to the Part 3 folder in our Google Drive. So I'd love to walk you through this process. So I have got Visual Studio Code open, and I'm going to begin this process by opening up the starter document. So I'm just going up to File and Open, and I'm tracking down. So I'll kind of go from the very start here. So I'm going to my class root folder, that one that we made during week 2. You can see my 4 folders in here. So to begin with, I'm going to start with my starter document. That's in my resource folder. I'm just going to go ahead and open this up. And remember that the starter is just simply that. It's a file that we can use. We can open it, and then we can immediately save it as another file so that we don't have to write this chunk of HTML. Let me make this a little bit easier for you guys to see too. Bear with me. I'm just going to go ahead and try and minimize a few things and make my code larger. All right, there we go. Hopefully that's gonna be a decent size for this recording. Okay, cool. So first things first, I need to save this document. So I'm gonna go up to File and Save As. And if I'm following the assignment sheet, what I'm asking you guys to do is to put that in your projects folder, and then specifically in your Project One folder. And on the assignment sheet, I'm asking you guys to name this document styleguide.html. So style guide.html. Notice I'm putting no spaces in the file names. Really anything that goes inside of your folder, folks, should not have a space in it. So HTML files, CSS files, image files, when we get to those, anything that's going to directly go inside of your web pages should not have a space in the file name. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And there we go. I just want to make sure that the file has now been changed. And you can even see here at the top, you can kind of see the breadcrumbs. It'll always just like show you where that file is. So, it's in my folder, my projects folder, in the Project One folder, and there we go. Okay. So in the actual assignment sheet itself, you can find all of the heading tags and the paragraph tags and block quote and ordered list tags that we're going to be using for this. So you can certainly reference that, or you can take a look at just what I'm doing here. We're going to start off with some H1 tags. That includes an opening and closing H1 tag. And then we're going to put in some text that we can actually style. The whole idea of this is I'm going to copy this actually before I do this. I'm going to bang out the rest of the header tags. So this one would be I'm changing both the opening tag, the closing tag, and then the text inside. And I'm going to do that all the way until I get through H5. That will give us 5 different examples of type that we can style. And these examples are going to be the examples that potentially going to be using in your in this project, in the actual website. This is going to allow you guys the opportunities to start to play around with how you want your type to look. So next, I'm going to go ahead and put in an example of paragraph type. You can always, I'll go ahead and put, like, for example, here, paragraph. But I would actually recommend getting a good chunk of text to use within this, so you can actually see what a paragraph, chunk of paragraph text would look like. So I'm just going to temporarily head on over to like lorem, like in a lorem ipsum generator. And I'm just going to like generate like a paragraph for a few sentences of text. Obviously, there's lots of lorem ipsum generators. This will work for me, I think. There we go. I'm just copying that, and I'm going to paste that into my example here. And again, it's just example type, so I can see what a paragraph of type will look like when I style it. Let's see here. We will also do a block quote. Block quote is typically those like aside larger sort of texts you'll see oftentimes in print publications or in websites. We're going to go ahead and create an example then of an ordered list. So lists begin with one of two tags, or two types of lists: ordered lists and unordered lists. Ordered lists will begin with numbers, and an unordered list begins with bullet points. The assignment itself requires you have two examples of this inside of your 4-page website. So one of your pages will have an ordered list, one of your pages will have an unordered list. At a minimum, you can certainly have more than one example of each, but yeah. So inside of an unordered list, we would have what are called list items. These are the actual elements that that have the bullet points. So I'll just go ahead and type like list item example. And maybe I'll put like, I don't know, 3 list items in here so we can get a good idea of what that looks like. And I'm actually going to just copy that chunk of text right there. Actually, let's do this. Let's say ordered list example. So hang on a second. Go that way, you can tell the difference between these. So again, I'm copying that whole thing and pasting it. I'm just changing the OLs in this case to ULs. ULs meaning unordered list. The list items, the individual things that will be bullet pointed, stay with the LI, but here I'm going to go ahead and change this to unordered. Again, so we can kind of tell the difference between those. All right, cool. That's actually it for right now in terms of the elements that we are going to want to style. I'm going to go ahead and save this document, and then I'm going to just test it in the browser. So I'm going to use my open in browser extension. The shortcut to use it would be Alt Option on a Mac, or on a PC, it's the Alt key. And you do Alt B. And that didn't work for me the other day as well, which is goofy. In a second, let's see. What am I doing wrong here? Yeah, this happened to me last semester as well. Okay, not a biggie. I haven't had any students that have issues with it, but for whatever reason, my computer is fighting me on this. If you do end up having an issue using the extension, you can always open up the web page that you're working on manually. It's maybe a good opportunity for me to show you guys how to do that. So I'm just going to go to my browser, open up a new tab, and I'm going to open up that web page on my computer. So I'm going to go to File, Open File, and I'll do it manually. I'll just track down my root folder, go into my projects folder, project 1, and there it is, style guide. What this is going to do, it's going to show you what this document looks like before it's being styled. So header tags, I forgot to change the type in there. I'll do that in a moment. But these header tags come with some inherent properties, even though they're not being styled. That includes a size that's being set by any browser, as well as the size and the weight. And you'll notice that they also have like a double space happening after them. Paragraph text is just default. It's waiting for us to style it. Same thing with the block quote. But you can actually see here the difference between the unordered lists and the ordered lists. So the ordered lists, again, come with numbers. Unordered come with bullet points. Okay. Cool. I'm going to bounce back over into Visual Studio Code. I'm going to go ahead and set up a CSS document and then link it to the HTML. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to make a brand new document. I just did File New, or the shortcut of Command F. I'm going to go ahead and save this. This file is going to go inside the same folder as the style guide HTML file. And I need to give it a name at this point. And the assignment sheet gives you a specific name that I want you guys to name this, please. It's called style.css. Okay, so that has to be saved. There we go. So it's saved now, it exists. And the final step, and this is key, is that you must now link this to the HTML document. Just because these two things live inside of the same folder doesn't mean that they recognize each other yet. We have to link this. So I'm going to go over to the HTML document. Specifically, I'm going to go up into the head area here before the closing head tag. So you can do it just after the title. And that's where you can go ahead and do the link. That's going to happen with a link tag. Then we have a couple of properties we have to define. First of all, we explain what it is. So that would be a style sheet. And then we need to actually do the linking itself. That happens with this tag called href, or hyperlink reference is what that sort of stands for there. And then we type the name of the file that we are linking to. Okay. And the thing I'm going to show you guys right now is the easiest thing to mess up in this. So definitely make sure you do this next step. We must close this by putting a closing, bracket key there. So notice how like line 8 for me is showing that there's an error. It's showing that there's an error because line 7 has an opening caret right here, but it doesn't have a closing caret. So I got to do that. There we go. That's the one thing I would say that will mess most students up who are beginning with this, is they'll forget to put that closing, sideways triangle bracket thing. So make sure you do that, then go ahead and save. Tab. So I'll show you guys a few examples that you can actually incorporate into this. So what we want to do is essentially style each and every one of these examples, showing how we would potentially want these things, these elements to look in our actual project that we're working on. Okay, so that's all going to happen in the style sheet. Let's start with the heading 1 tag, the H1 tag. Okay. So this kind of builds on what you guys learned through Code Academy, but it's the first time that I'm showing you guys some styles here. So, excuse me. So what we're doing is calling out to the tag. It's just in this case can be H1. And remember that the entire style happens inside of curly brackets. So we need an opening curly bracket, closing curly bracket. And from there, you can just go ahead and start to define, how you want this thing to look. So I'll do a very basic example here. Let's do font family first. From here is where you would type in, the font family itself. I'll do a very basic one for this. I'll use Arial, for example, because I know that most computers have that. And we do want to make sure that we're using web-safe fonts. Okay, so there's only a handful of fonts that show up on a Mac and a PC. And that we would want to use potentially either those, or you can use Google Fonts for this as well, which dramatically opens up the possibilities for typography. I'll do one example of each so you guys can see those. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do Arial. What this means, like when you see font family like this, what it means is it wants us to use Arial as the default font family for H1s. And it's saying that if the computer doesn't have this, default to Helvetica. If it doesn't have that, default to sans serif. Won't be a big deal. Every computer has Arial, so that's what we'll display. I do want to make sure I have the semicolon at the end of that line. Remember, after every single line of of CSS, you want to make sure that you're ending it with the semicolon. Okay, so I'm going to define my font family. I'm going to definitely do font size, color. Maybe I'll do font weight. There's font style is an important one. I'll touch base on that, as well as letter spacing. So let's do all of those as an example here. So let's just say I do font size next. I believe that for heading text, I want to say the default size for heading 1 text, I think it's 16. So let's do something a little bit bigger. We'll do 24 pixels. Okay. PX is the short for pixels. And you do want to make sure you're working in pixels, not inches. Inches don't mean anything on the web because every screen is a different size. Inches are not relative. The one thing that's constant when you're dealing and designing for the web is pixels. Okay? No matter what physical dimensions a screen is that you're designing for, all screens are made of pixels. And those are the units that we design for when we're working for the web. We can also do color. You can choose from any of the colors that are in this list. We haven't really talked about hexadecimal color codes yet. So for now, for today, I'll go ahead and use this as well. But we'll have a conversation at some point about hexadecimal color codes. Oh, I don't know what color I'm feeling like today. I'm just gonna go with something fairly straightforward. Let's just say I choose blue. Let's see, what else do I want to do? I mean, we could do font weight. I would use this potentially if I wanted the weight to be, there's a number of options in here. I would not use these numbers. Those numbers are a very old way of styling and it leaves too much interpretation up to the browsers. It's good to take control over what you want and not leave interpretation. So things you might do would include either bold or normal. Those are the two that you'd really potentially want to be using. In this case, my H1 text by default will be bold. So if I wanted it to be bold, I wouldn't actually have to type this because it's already bold. That's one of the inherent default properties of header text, H text. But I would potentially use this if I wanted it to be just normal, if I didn't want it to appear bold. Just because it appears as bold as default does not mean that we are obligated to do that. So I am realizing as I'm recording this, guys, that my computer's about to die. So I don't want to lose us here in the middle of this recording, but bear with me just for a moment while I plug in so that we can keep on rolling here. Okay. All right, very good. Let's see what else. So I'm going to keep my text bold, actually. So I don't actually need to keep the font weight bold in here because, again, H text is bold already by default. If for some reason I wanted it to be italics, I could do that as well. I'll show you what that looks like real quick. I don't know if I'm going to keep it, but it would basically just be a font style of italics. So that's what that line of code would look like if you wanted to use that. I do think I'm going to tweak the kerning on this. So let's say letter spacing would be our kerning. The default value would be 0 pixels. So if you want to tighten up the letter spacing or kerning, you can use a negative value, like for example, negative pixels. Okay? Or if you wanted to expand the letter spacing, you could do that as well. Okay? One thing I'll do here just to kind of clean this up. It doesn't necessarily matter with CSS if you put a space in here or not, but I like to stay consistent. And I noticed in here that I did not. So I'm just going to remove the spaces out of there. I just prefer my code to be clean and consistent. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to go back over to the HTML document. Oh, actually, again, my browser extension's not working. So I'm going to actually just come on over here. So quick word on those of you who are using the browser extension. Don't do the Alt-B shortcut here while you're on a style sheet. It's not going to show correctly. You have to be on the HTML document when you do your Alt-B browser shortcut. So anyway, again, I'm doing mine manually, so I'm just going to pull that up over here. So file, open file, and track down my HTML file. And we want to see here if, yeah, there we go. So my heading text is listening to the instructions. If it is not, if you try this and it's not, a couple of things you want to be aware of. Number one, make sure that you have saved your HTML file with the link in place. Okay. So if I make a change to this, and that's not necessarily mean, but if I make a change to something and I don't save it, those changes don't exist on my computer. But this allows me now to look at my heading text and make a decision. You know, is that how I would want my heading text to show up in my final version of my website? You know, is it too big? Is it too small? Do I like the color? Do I like the font? Those are all things you guys have to decide as designers. I think for mine, I mean, mine's just sort of a generic example, right? But maybe I want my font size to be much, much larger, you know, for my heading text, maybe a 48. Maybe the blue I decide is kind of gaudy. You know, you can actually click in here and pull up a color picker, which is kind of cool. You know, maybe I'm going to make it sort of a dark gray or something along those lines. Let's get that to stick. Cool. And yeah, so again, I can save that. I can come back over to my browser, just refresh it. There we go. In fact, you know, maybe, again, I'm just kind of working on this sort of abstractly, but maybe I'll make my font size for those headers even larger. Maybe I'll go like a 64. There we go. Cool. So the key is I'm changing that, guys. I'm changing it. I'm saving it. So I'm just using the keyboard shortcut of Command S, and then I'm going back over to the browser and I'm refreshing that. Okay. Let's see here. So we can do the same thing for like the other header tags. I'm just going to copy that chunk of code. Well, here, we'll hand code it. H2. Again, I'd want to potentially define a font family. Probably want to stay mostly in terms of your header fonts with the same font, but potentially different sizes. You know, they can decrease in size as you go along. 48 pixels with that. Use that same color. I'm just going to copy that so I don't have to use the color picker again. You know, and again, I can kind of work my way down through this. I mean, by all means, you can use different fonts for different headers, but I would try and limit your font selection to, you know, a relatively small range. You don't want it to look too insane. You want it to have some consistency. You know, I'm just going to copy this. So I would do this potentially, working my way down. Save that real quick. Give these a look. Now that I made this larger, I think I might tighten up the spacing on my kerning there. So again, these are the design decisions you kind of have to make as you're moving along with things. Get that tighter kerning. Let's refresh it and see. Yeah, there we go. So again, those are some things to think about. You would then move on to style your paragraph type. Paragraph type being relatively small in nature, where you've got large bodies of paragraph or body copy. I'm going to go with a fairly legible font in this case. Maybe I'm going to go with like a nice serif based font. I'll go with like Cambria for this. And then let's do a font size. Body copy, I would say go 12 pixels or more. I'm going to actually go with like 14 pixels in this case. I'm probably okay with like default black and it being not bold type. So my paragraph type style will be fairly straightforward. So again, I saved that. I'm going to try it out here. So actually that 14 point type to me looks really small. I'm going to go larger with that. 24 point. Yeah, that's feeling a little bit better. But again, we would do the same thing with then like our list items potentially. List items, you know, again, maybe in that case, again, I'm doing like font family stuff that's maybe consistent. Maybe I'll go a little bit smaller with it, maybe 20 point. Maybe I could change the color of it. Again, these are all decisions, not saying you have to choose the exact code that I'm using here, guys. I'm just showing you guys some examples. Here we go, make this blue violet. Okay, here, give it a refresh, there we go. Cool, and then there's the block quote as well. Block quotes typically, don't have to follow these rules, but typically block quotes are large. They're oftentimes italics. You can kind of think of it as, again, a quote or like a pull quote. If you're familiar with like print media, the term pull quote, it's typically a quotation. It's been pulled out of an article and placed on the side with some emphasis. So again, I'm going to go ahead and like kind of treat it that way. Quote. Open, closing, curly brackets. I'm going to actually borrow some of this code go with it Cambria, but I'm going to go much, much bigger with my type, maybe a 72, maybe a lighter color. I don't necessarily want it to be. I don't want it to be quite as strong as the rest, so I'll do something like that. Cool. And then I'm going to also make it italics. So that would just be font style. With italics. All right, cool. So obviously I didn't finish the heading, heading. Here, let's actually make this correct. I don't want to mislead you guys when building this. So this should actually say header 3, header 4, header 5. I didn't style those. I would ask you guys to style yours, please. But you can kind of see what that stuff now looks like, That's essentially it for this assignment. Once you're done styling heading 4, heading 5, you potentially zip up this root folder and you submit that to me. So again, I would be looking for you guys to, potentially explore some colors that you think you want to use in your actual project, fonts you want to use. I realize I didn't put a Google font example, but I'll put a link into our class on how to use Google fonts. Again, it will allow you to move beyond just these default fonts. But I hope this this video ends up being helpful for you guys. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to me via email. You can always zip your root folder and attach it to the email when you're asking specific questions. I can get in there, I can look at your code, I can put in comments, and I can send it right back to you then. Okay. All right, guys, cool. Hope this helps out.